Moonshine Jesus, baby, alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are thrilled that you have joined us today. Today, we will be talking about the first two episodes of the new Star Wars series, The Acolyte. Before we dig in, though, a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure you remember that we are sponsored by progressivechristianity.org, a great place to go check out. You can find all kinds of resources there, as well as some free newsletter you can sign up for. We really encourage you to do that. Make sure you sign up with us, the Moonshine Jesus Show, wherever you get your podcast, and follow us on Facebook. And before I get into the last piece of housekeeping, though, I want to welcome Caleb onto the show, my good buddy who's always here. How are you doing, Caleb? And what are you thinking about doing a little Star Wars today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Mark. And man, I am thrilled as always to be talking about Star Wars today. I can't wait to get into it.
I can't either. We need to let y'all know we will be spoiling the first two episodes where this is not as spoiler-free. We actually enjoy spoiling it, so, we'll do it gleefully. We're really not particularly apologetic about it. No. So just know that you are warned that that's where we'll be heading. So we also need to have drinks. I'm wondering what you decided to go with to help lubricate this discussion.
Oh, yes, that's right. Lubricating the discussion. Okay, so I noticed something that I hadn't seen many times before in Star Wars, which was a yellow lightsaber. And
last time we saw one was with Rey. Rey switched to a yellow lightsaber.
That's right. So we don't get that very often.
No,
and I
really
was
don't.
inspired, and so I brought out my lightsaber again that I've been using for our Star Wars shows, and I've got a yellow one. So this is actually a mimosa. It's pineapple juice, just a little bit of pineapple juice, and mostly sparkling wine. So I've got my yellow lightsaber here. How about you? What are you drinking?
I've always wanted a blue lightsaber, so I created a blue lightsaber. It's nothing more than a blue margarita, but I was like, it's too much fun. I've always wanted a blue. This will make me feel like a Jedi throughout the show as we drink from our lightsabers.
Wait, we got to have a duel.
All right, man. Let's test these lightsabers out and have a quick drop, and we'll catch everybody on the other side.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where today we're talking about Star Wars, The Acolyte. And as Mark mentioned, we are 2 episodes into this new Star Wars series. And if you're not familiar with it, it is 100 years before the rise of the Galactic Empire. And so if you're not like a Star Wars super fan, maybe something that will help you contextualize that is it takes place about 100 years before the events of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And so the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order preside during a time of centuries-long peace. And that is where we find ourselves at the beginning. So, Mark, I want to start by talking about the elephant in the room. Yes. And that critics and audiences do not agree about the quality of this program, but it is in the way of the way that this usually happens. And that's that this time critics love it and audiences kind of hate it. And I say that because the critic score is 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. And right now, just before this episode started, I looked and the audience score is sitting at 27%. Yeah. And so, Mark, I'd like to know, what is that about? Why?
This was actually It shows that we've been doing this show together for far too long. This is actually the first question I was going to ask in the Theopolitico segment. So I'm going to answer it. You know,
So I stole a question, but it wouldn't have make me look
technically,
stupid.
technically,
Does that
yeah.
still count?
I'm going to give you this one. I'm going to
Okay,
give you
thanks.
this one. I am.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, this is one of those things, and I'm really curious to get your response to it, and we'll be less fanboying here, less geeking out, and more being analytical. But I think it's important. We might as well go ahead and talk about it. This is essentially what's being called review bombing. Mm-hmm. The fan base of Star Wars in particular seems to have difficulty with non-white lead roles, male lead roles.
What?
I know. And I don't think it's any surprise that it's been the most review bombed Star Wars ever. Uh-huh. Nothing's ever had this great of a disparity between what the critics say and what the viewers are saying. And I don't think it's coincidence that this also happens to be the most diverse group of characters we've ever seen in a Star Wars film, led by several strong female characters. I don't think there's any doubt that a great deal of it is coordinated and intentional because, frankly, fragile male white egos are being hurt. I'm curious, why do you think they're so scared of diversity, man?
I think that, it's I think a lot of white men have grown up geeking out to this show and they want to continue to see the same thing. And they feel like personally attacked whenever they don't see themselves in the show, not thinking about all the other people who have never seen themselves in the show. And so I think that shows a real lack of understanding about what Star Wars is ultimately about, which means that maybe we're not really all that big of fans to begin with, and we can't buy into the thing that Star Wars is about. I think another interesting thing about it, Mark, is that a lot of these review bombs are AI generated.
That's
and
true.
So more than ever before, we see AI generated review bombing going on here. What do you think that says about the future of how we're going to rate movies as we're going forward, especially like beloved franchises like this?
You know, in a lot of ways, it means that actual reviewers who have been worried that AI could eat into their jobs will actually become more important, because you can't trust the masses response, because so many people are going to be creating these AI reviews. And if you learn a particular reviewer's voice, what they write in, you'll be able to tell real clearly if they wrote the article in the actual review. So in a lot of ways, I think this strengthens what the power of reviewers rather than the AI maybe taking away from them. But I don't want to go too far into that, because I love Star Wars so much. I love Star Wars so much, and I don't want us to lose the opportunity to talk about it. So I'll shut up.
I do love it too, and I also think you're right, and I think this also speaks to the fact that maybe review aggregators will become less important in the future if they are not true reviews that we're aggregating. I do think, though, that some of the criticisms are fair, Mark, and one review in particular I want to get your perspective on as we're geeking out, okay? And so one of the criticisms that I've seen from like a real live human who has watched these episodes and reviewed them is that one failure maybe of the Star Wars franchise is that we've got all of these different shows happening at all kinds of different times, but really they all feel pretty similar. And this one is taking place 100 years before the events of Phantom Menace, but it could equally be taking place at pretty much any other time. It could be taking place maybe like 2 years before Phantom Menace, or it could be taking place after. What do you think? What do you think? I
don't know who wrote that, but I hope they're not a friend of yours, because they couldn't be more wrong. They could not be more wrong here. This could not have taken place in any other time. And what they're doing here is really important. This takes place during the High Republic, when the Jedi were basically ruling the known
Yeah.
universe that they were in.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we see them at the height of their power, and we see them not being perfect. And I think it's really important. We see them here at the height of their power, and I'm going to have a question later that kind of relates to that as well.
Yeah.
We're seeing this transition from them being somebody who is there for peace and is going to have a downfall within 100 years, where all of a sudden they're marginal in the society in less than 100 years. And I think the setup to this and showing the resistance to the Jedi, to the High Republic, is going to be really important. And I absolutely love that it feels like Star Wars. The director, who is, it's genius, and I'm blanking on her name right now, but she did Russian Dolls. Was very careful to make it feel like all of the camera shots were on tracks, that they weren't. There's a couple of really fancy shots, but for the most part, it feels like the original. She does everything practically. We don't have any of the volume that so many shoot on that looks beautiful, but kind of loses a realness and earthiness to it. And she does all of that. I love that she does that. So one, I think they're wrong. It matters that it feels like Star Wars. As a matter of fact, it feels so much like Star Wars, it felt like a warm hug to me. And two, no, it could not have been set anywhere else. What they're doing just in the first 2 episodes, I can't imagine what they're going to do in the rest. It's such a big setup to help us see the journey of the Jedi and what it brought to the full Republic. So no, I think I'm pretty sure I think they're wrong. Yeah.
I thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. It is not a friend of mine. It's a review in Forbes. So take that for what you will. So I want to get both of those things out of the way, because I loved this series.
Oh my God,
so I started watching it, and in fact, I think it's was one of my favorites right away. I really got invested in it. And so I didn't look up anything about it until after I had watched it. And I thought, man, all these people are wrong about
could be
this.
right.
So I was curious. I didn't want to set up I didn't want to bring my own bias or anything. I wanted to see what you thought about it before.
True confession. I've watched them both 3 times already. I have.
See? Confession.
I loved it, man.
No, it was good.
I loved it.
It was good. Okay.
What I loved was that it did feel like Star Wars. It felt so original Star Wars for all the reasons I said. Yeah. But we get all these new characters, and there is a complexity that's here that we don't see in all of our other Star Wars. Star Wars tends to be binary, this or that, good and evil. And I love that there's so much intertwining. I think they have the right director, writer, and that we're going to go to neat, interesting places that we haven't, and see twists unlike we've seen in most Star Wars.
I think you're right. And I think we've got interesting characters here, and we've got some some real development that gives us complicated characters, as you said. So I want to make sure we've got some time to really geek out about some of the real details here. And so I want to know, Mark, we find out that the main character has a twin sister who's been killing Jedi. Her name is May, and May has a master that she's learning about the dark side of the Force from. And I want to know who you think her master is.
Okay, now you've stolen 2 questions.
Yes, so I will admit, as I was writing my questions today, I said I'm going to think about what Mark's going to ask, and I am making those my questions for the setup.
For maybe it looks stupid, I have 4 questions, and you just took one of them.
Okay.
So for May's master, I think it's one of 2 people. I'm going to go with the straightforward. I hope it's not this one, because it ties it too much into the Skywalker saga. Yeah, it could be Palpatine's mentor, Death Plagueis, because they have to kind of come out from under the person that they're under. Right. They got to bring someone in to help them do that. I think it could be that. Here's who I really hope that it is. And I think this would be brilliant. This would be so much fun. And so because of how they've already set this character up, I hope it's Chimera.
Yeah.
I hope it's Chimera, the guy who seems kind of like maybe he's a little bit of a drunk, and maybe he's a little bit goofy. but he's done a few things that kind of tip the hat that he's more than he seems.
You think it's gonna be him? Yeah.
Like there's a moment with May and he kind of surprise each other in an alleyway. And May, we've watched take down a Jedi by hand with just some knives. We've watched it. And he like avoided and sweeped and turned and avoided everything she threw at him before she realized who it was. There's a few other things that I'm going to hold off on them because they might give you ideas of what other questions could be. But I'm really hoping it's Chimera, man. I think that would be a beautiful, beautiful twist. And it could. No, I won't go there. I won't go to the other one. Those are my two first guess. I have a third guess, but it's more of a throwaway guess. What about you? What do you think?
Darth Plagueis was my guess, and so I would like to see Chimera. I think that would be interesting, but I think you're right. I think Darth Plagueis is the obvious one, so it'll be interesting to see if we get an answer to that. I bet probably towards the end of the season. Okay, so I'm curious, Mark. So we've already established that while some people have been critical about the time period, that maybe it is important. We haven't actually gotten to explore this time period very much, and it's kind of fun to see Jedi at the height of their success. And I'm curious, as we think about the time period that they're in, what groundwork do you think that this series is actually laying for the future of the Star Wars franchise?
I think what it's doing is trying to help us understand the relationship more fully between the Sith and the Jedi. I think it's also trying to help us understand that the perfection view of the Jedi that we have in so much of the movies maybe was false. And I think that it's also trying to set us up for going beyond our final movies, where we began to understand that that a balance in the Force. We in the prequels and in the first three movies, we have that the Force is either or. You're either on good or you're either bad. In the last three movies, we start exploring the idea of there being balance, and I think that's a big part of what's going to be happening here, particularly with the twins. Is we're going to start seeing that the Force is most powerful when it's balanced, when you pull from both sides. So I think those are the two primary things we're going to get from it. But it's also important just in the storytelling to understand the further backstory of the Jedi and how they once ruled and how they became a marginalized group of people.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun to see that kind of happen, and I agree. I think we're going to get more context, and that's going to help us appreciate the other stuff more. But I also think that this is maybe a time period that we might see explored more fully through other pieces of the Star Trek franchise or Star Wars franchise that they create. Okay, I've got one other question that I need to ask before this section ends. Okay, so since the first two episodes have not been super well received, I want to know, Mark, what can happen? What needs to happen over the course of this season to bring long-term fans along? Is there a way that the series can do something else to bring fans along for season one?
I think there's the folks, the people who are doing the review bombing right now. We're not going to bring them along. They've already made their mind up, and no amount of anything's going to change their mind. Here's the thing: they're going to watch it, but they're going to pretend like they don't like it. The Acolyte opened with 4.5 million views. X-Men '97, which was highly loved. It took them weeks to get to 4 million views. Yeah. So people are watching it, whether or not they're admitting it. But we're not going to convince them. I think the biggest thing it needs to do, and we need to get to this rather quickly, and I think because of what the writing, for instance, the writing has been moving along pretty fast. We find out there's twins almost immediately. That's the kind of thing that a not so sophisticated writer would have just strung out over 2 or 3 episodes of, oh, this is so mysterious. Why does everyone think that she's doing this when she's over? You know? And so we see a person. I think we need to a massive twist. Something like, this is not going to be it. This is my third guess of who May's master is. Something like Master Soul also has a twin who is hers, or Master Soul is actually playing a dual role.
Both sides.
And actually is her. It's something like that. So he was the master to each of them because he was trying to bring them together because of certain things. And anyway, I think that's a real possibility. We need something like that that's so wild and such a twist that doesn't play good evil, but kind of brings it all together, that would make people realize, oh, this is something new but interesting. So do you think there's something else that could be done?
I don't know that we're done. I don't know.
I don't know where that voice came
from. But I don't know that we need to worry about it. I think the show is good as it is, and if people come along, fine. But hopefully the viewership's strong enough that they continue to go forward with the second season. Hey, I want to ask a million more questions, but we don't have time.
I want to answer a million more questions. I love this show so much.
I know, right? And it is Star Wars. We talk about it forever, but we've got to do our Theopolitico segment because there's a lot here for us to talk about in terms of theology and politics. So let's take a drink and come back, talk about Theopolitico elements of the show.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for our Theopolitico segment. Caleb has already stolen one of my questions for this. I'm glad that I'm massively over-prepared because I love this show so much. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I got 7 different questions for this section. So I'm just going to start randomly picking them and getting your input because I'm really curious about all of these. So we've already talked about this a little bit. We're seeing the Jedi at the height of their power here. This is when they are really as powerful as they're ever going to be in this universe. We're also seeing them, as we know because of the future movies, we're seeing them just before their fall. And this happens a lot in history where someone hits a height and then falls. What is it about being so powerful that leads so many to failure? And then I've got a follow-up question as well.
Part of it, I think, is that you think when you are so powerful that you can't fail, that that you are that you can do no wrong, that you're always right. And frequently, especially when you're talking about this in terms of say countries who have accumulated a lot of power, that they also spread themselves so thin and get involved in so many other things that they can't really focus on the things that really matter, like say their infrastructure and their people. And so I think certainly clear that this is what happened to, say, the Roman Empire as it expanded further and further, that it got so distracted on the fronts that it couldn't keep up with its infrastructure and all. And I think that's something that we're likely to see with the United States as well. Right. That the United States has kind of had this attitude of we're so powerful and we can't fail, and we may be on the side of decline of the U.S. So that's my initial thoughts on it. What do you think, Mark?
No, I agree. There's a certain amount of hubris that comes when you're at the height of your power. And like you said, you feel like you can't fail. There's also a certain amount of entitlement that tends to come along when you're at that height. And so rolling on into what was my follow-up question, but I had 2 follow-up questions, but of whether the United States is coming to that point. I think we're seeing clear signs. It's kind of interesting, I think, to be watching the Acolyte right now as we watch the Jedi kind of become, and I think we're going to see that they weren't as pure as they maybe once were, as we see why and what happened to the twins. I think that we're seeing the beginnings of the same fall in the United States, where there's folks who feel so entitled and so having so much hubris about who we are as a nation that they're beginning to make choices that are hurtful and are intentionally pushing down on other folks. And we see that all the time in the history of the world. When powerful nations begin having those types of actions, it is the beginning of the fall typically. And I'm really concerned this election year that we may be heading in that way. We certainly look like it. I'm curious though, as Christians, and admittedly, we have different takes on Christianity in the U.S. But let's say on by the teachings of Jesus, what should powerful people actually be doing? How should they be behaving that might be different from what we're seeing?
Well, I think certainly caring for the most vulnerable in the land. I think that if we've got leadership who is looking out at the people who live in the country and who are trying to care and support them, then that is always a good decision for the health of the country.
Absolutely.
And I think that if we've got really great leadership, then we're looking beyond the borders of the country and looking at the issues of the world and trying to be involved, not in conflicts, but we're trying to be involved in those places where we see suffering in the world and trying to address those. And I think whenever the U.S. has been at its best, it's been intervening in helpful ways with aid and through diplomacy and through efforts with other countries to try to make the world a better place. I think in the places where the U.S. has not acted so helpfully, it's been in places where we've just exerted our power as empire when we've refused to adhere to the United Nations, for instance, and as we have decided to act unilaterally to influence the course of governments in other countries. I think particularly about in Central and South America, but all over the world, really, in ways that we've interfered in the politics of other countries that have ended up with disastrous effects. Afghanistan's another case in point. It's just I think that in order for leadership in the United States to kind of right the wrong that we've been going down the path we've been going down, it involves looking at people who are the most in need and making sure that we're caring for them and not exploiting them. Certainly not favoring corporations or the war machine over individuals. And those are just a few of the things I think that that leadership really kind of gets wrong. And I think Democrats do better than Republicans, but I think that both political parties really get this wrong a lot.
Right.
Well, what do you think?
No, I agree with everything you said. I also think that, biblically, we see over and over again Jesus' teachings that the best leaders are servants of all. And I'll get real political here. I mean, we've got two people who are going, one of them is going to be president. And it's very clear. One of them is willing to be, to some degree, a servant to try to help folks. And one of them is very much self-serving and is interested in the power. And so if you're going to name yourself as a Christian, and if you care, if you're also a true nationalist, if you actually care about your nation and don't want to see the downfall, I think all of the things that we've been discussing tells us very clearly that there is one person you can pick that is pushing us towards the downfall of our nation, that we can see historically that's true, and one person who isn't going to fix everything, but at least at heart is a reasonably good person and is willing at the right times or at certain times to be a servant to folks. And that's an important choice that needs to be made. We need to recognize that as Christians. I've got time for one more question here. And I'm looking through, this is the one I'm curious of, and we've hinted at it. It's part of why I didn't give part of my answer to why I think Kymir might be May's master. But I'm curious. Kymir, in talking with May, quotes the start of the Sith mantra and says, peace is a lie, which is the beginning of the Sith mantra. Is peace a lie?
I think that depends on what you mean by peace. And I think that a lot of people, whenever they talk about peace, what they really mean is kind of an absence of conflict. And
Right.
as we've heard, is it Martin Luther King Jr. who said that peace is not the absence of violence, but the presence of justice, or the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. Yeah. And so I think it's that peace has to be active. It's not something that like you just achieve and then it's there, like
Right.
it's not just the lion lying down with the lamb. That peace is fragile and it has to be worked for and maintained, and it's never perfect. And it never means that like nobody's arguing or that there aren't differences of opinion. And I think that unfortunately a lot of churches really advocate for that kind of peace, that like, well, we need to be nice to each other, we don't want any conflict, we don't want to talk about anything hard because we want everything to be nice and peaceful. And that's not peace.
I call
that
it
is just
kumbaya Christianity.
A kumbaya Christianity. That's right. I like that phrase. I don't like the notion because they
right. I agree.
We don't want a kumbaya Christianity. We want a Christianity that works for peace where there is justice for all people. And so, I think that that kind of peace, the kind of peace that Jesus talked about, I think is possible, but it takes a lot of effort, and it's something that you both have to try to achieve and then maintain. Yeah. And so I think that's actually the call of all Christians, is to be working ever more towards that peace.
Yeah, I completely agree.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I completely agree that what we have here is pretty typical in any kind of either or scenario, where one side oversimplifies the other side's argument to make it easier to destroy. And in this case, this is definitely happening. The peace that we really need to be talking about, and that the Jedi are talking about, they recognize that they wouldn't have lightsabers if they didn't realize that it was a piece that had to be worked at all the time. Now, they don't use, particularly right now, they're not supposed to use the lightsabers for violence or aggression, but to protect the peace and to help keep the peace, which that's a whole different argument that we need to go into at some point, I'm sure. But I do think that this is a clear example of oversimplifying the other side in order to make it easy, because peace is a constant pursuit. The moment you let up on it, it begins to unravel. It has to be worked at constantly. Okay, we could keep going on. I have several more questions, but we're running short on time. So I'm going to take a quick drop here because I don't want us to miss out on our favorite segment. And I also don't want to give you any more opportunities to steal any questions. So we're going to take this drop and we'll come back on the other side with Make Me Look Stupid.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're entering part 3, our Make Me Look Stupid segment, where we get to ask questions to see if we can make the co-host look stupid, or if we just want to find out someone's perspective on something, or Mark's favorite, to try and make predictions that hold me accountable to later after the season. So I want to start, Mark, with this isn't, I don't think, a real like make you look stupid question. Yeah. I think it's just a general point of curiosity. I'm wondering about a point of Christian practice. So we see in the second episode the scene where May is trying to attack Master Torben, and he has been meditating with this protective energy, the force around him for like a decade.
10 years. 10 years, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, Mark, I've seen a lot of debate in different Christian circles about meditation as a practice. And I'm curious, Mark,
Hmm.
what do you think about meditation? Do you think it's a helpful practice? Can it be practiced authentically by Christians? And if so, how so?
Oh, absolutely. Meditation is so important and essential, and it brings. Speaking of peace, it's one of the routes to help find some inner peace, to kind of silence ourselves and silence the world, so that we can rejuvenate ourselves and kind of be recentered. It makes us healthier people, and it makes us able to pursue the things that are important to us. Our ability to do that is even stronger. So it's one of the things at our church that we talk about a lot and promote. We actually have several groups that operate out of the church that help folks in learning how to meditate and to be in meditative states and to improve their lives through it. So yeah, for me, it's fantastic. Even in our services, we try to have moments of long silence for meditation. We even talk when we pray, we talk about it, that it can be received as a prayer or as a meditation, just to breathe in and breathe out and allow the words to float over you. And so, yeah, I think it's essential. And, if it's not for you, that's fine. It's not like you have to have it, but it is such an essential tool that it can be very, very helpful, in my opinion. What's your take on meditation?
Yeah, so I grew up in a progressive congregation, but in a very conservative part of the country. And so there was a lot of talk about how really the only thing that was acceptable for Christians to do was prayer. And when they
Right.
said prayer, they meant like your head bowed
Right.
and your hands folded and you saying, beginning with our Father and ending with in Jesus' name, amen. And that was the only thing.
And probably saying Father God 5 or 6 times in the middle. And
Father
Father God,
God,
I just want to
just-
know, and Father God, and I just
yeah, that's it. That's
I know.
the formula, right?
I know the formula very well. Yeah,
You know that.
been
formula,
there, been there. I've been a part of that group as well.
And so it wasn't ever really a part of the church that I was a member of, but that was kind of in the water, and that never really resonated with me. I thought that surely that God was big enough for us to be able
Right.
to relate to that God in different ways, and so meditation became really meaningful for me, especially when I was in college and I was studying other religious traditions and experiencing other practices that could help me relate to the divine better. And I found that meditation in particular was something that really grounded me, especially in times when I felt kind of overwhelmed or like I had a lot going on in my life, that just stopping and being aware, doing body scans, just checking to see like how I was doing and making myself stop was really helpful. And I'm really bad at meditation because I'm really bad at stopping. And but
Try
every time that I do it, I'm like, man, that was the best
You can
way I
tell,
could have
man.
used that time.
I tell you, in
really
our
hard.
service, and we don't always do as well as we should in the amount of silence. We do some musical meditation always, but I have to say there are moments, and me being the person giving the message, there are moments that it's that meditative silence that inform me spiritually the most out of our hour there together.
Yeah.
I hear loud and clear. It is amazing what it can be.
And it's hard. There have been times when I've planned a meditation, like in terms of instead of my sermon, been like, I'm going to lead the congregation through a meditation today, and I'll be sitting there before that time, and I'm like, no, I can't do it. I'm going to talk and throw it out and just preach instead because I have. But every time that I'm able to allow myself to do it, I think I feel so much more centered now. And not only so much more centered like in myself and what I'm doing, but also more centered in like the divine presence, that more aware of the vastness of the universe and my place in it than I am before. So anyway, I was curious about your perspective on that because I get that question a lot. People ask me,
and we've never
talked.
okay? And we've never talked about it on the show, and we should. We should. It's an important tool in your spiritual toolbox. I really do believe that. Okay, so it's my turn. Yes.
Yes.
Here's my question to you. Like, one of the things I love about the Acolyte is that it feels sort of like it's not quite a noir mystery, but it feels like there's these mystery, like we're set up. There's a little bit of like investigative detective, and there's a little mystery going on, and there's several things that have been set up as mysteries, and I'm intrigued by all of them. The one that I'm the most curious about, and I'm very curious to see what your take is, and I believe we're going to start finding some parts of it out in the next 2 episodes. Why do you think they split up Osha and May? Also, I need to say right now, I think it's hysterical that Osha is Osha's name, because they also, like, Osha goes out on the wing of a spaceship to repair it.
Yeah.
When the High Republic has outlawed it because it's too dangerous, and her name is Osha.
Yeah. But
So anyway, all right. So why do you think they split up Osha and May as children? What was going on there? Because I think at this point it's pretty clear that these 4 Jedi made a choice, a joint choice that they did together to split them up, and maybe even put May in a place where they kind of assumed she wouldn't survive. So why do you think what was such an important thing to get these High Republic Jedi, who are thought of as kind of, perfect folks who do the right thing? What got them to do the wrong thing? What was so big?
I think there are people who are interested in exploring the dark side of the Force. And so they've got these 2 children that they are going to kind of experiment with on the kind of the light side and the dark side of the Force. And so they wanted to split up children who otherwise were identical, right? Identical twins, but one who had displayed, maybe some signs of kind of the dark side of the Force, and they wanted to nurture that in her to see which sides were more powerful. And so I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but that's my guess. That's what I'm thinking. What do you think, Mark? What do you think's happening here?
This is sort of a deep reach, but I think maybe that they saw. So in the last 3 movies in Star Wars, Kylo and Rey have this connection that's called a Force dyad, where people frequently are related, but the Force itself chooses to connect them for various reasons. And it gives them, beyond the connection, gives them extra abilities. They Force healing, communication over long distance, all kinds of really powerful things that other Jedi don't have.
Right.
I think that they sensed that these 2 twins would be the most powerful Force dyad wielders, and that they would have powers that none of them had, and that they're at the height of their power, and they're making mistakes because they don't want their power to be challenged. And so they separated these 2 kids, and maybe even did worse to May, in terms of putting her in a position where she might not have been able to survive. And maybe someone related to the Sith swept in and saved May at the last minute, and that's why May got saved and they thought she was dead. I don't know. But anyway, I think one of the things it feels like this show is doing is trying to help move the story after the last 3 movies, to show the Force and how important a blending of the Force is, and how important the balance of the Force is, and having a twin set that use the Force dyad and could be powerful for good or evil feels like a great setup for telling more stories later on. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know.
I think that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the season to see what we find out. And I'm excited about the rest of the season. Man. Yeah, I cannot wait for more episodes.
I love the show so much.
And you're going to be an expert because you watched the first 2 3 times through.
I know. I'm a geek. I'm a geek.
I love it. So by the time we get there, you're going to have analyzed all the little nuances. And you're going to be ready to explain it. I love it. But we're not quite ready for that.
No, we're
yet.
not.
And we've talked about Star Wars quite a bit lately, and you and I chatted a little bit before we started today about pivoting a little bit and doing something a little bit different next week. And you suggested season 3 of Sweet Tooth is out.
Absolutely. They've
And
dropped
that sounds
all
like
8 episodes.
all 8, so you can binge watch them, right? We could go through and binge watch them. And you and I had a lot of fun talking about Sweet Tooth whenever
so much fun.
yeah. And so just if you're not familiar with Sweet Tooth, 10 years into the Great Crumble, after society collapsed due to a viral pandemic of a disease known as the sick, wiped out most of the world's human population. We see babies born with hybrids with animal body parts and other characteristics.
Can you do the pinky wiggle without wiggling?
Oh, that's right.
Fingers?
That's right.
I don't know how. I watch them every time, and I go, "How the hell are they doing that?" I can't get either hand. I have to wiggle. I don't know. It's the sign of
like both of them.
The sign of the.
Yeah, that's right. Just if you get a little pinky wiggle.
If you can only, but it's only the pinky.
I can't do it. You gotta.
I'm going to assume that it's CGI. It has to be.
No one is that talented.
No, there's no way.
Only their pinky. But Mark, we also need to let everyone know about Wild Goose.
Yeah, man. So we are going to be once again at Wild Goose on the Goosecast stage. We'll let you know in the next few weeks what day and what time, but we really want to encourage you all to be there. Those who are the loyal followers who have been there, you know that we always hand out little moonshine jugs with very cool like Moonshine Jesus stickers.
Yeah.
It's cool. Well, we've upgraded our game. The mugs, the jugs this year are actually printed. They're not stickers. And so the first 20 folks who show up will get a themed drink. And you want to tell them what we're going to be talking about?
Oh, I'm very excited.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the newest season of The Boys on Amazon Prime. And the Prime Video series, The Boys, is just one of my favorites. I've really enjoyed. I was just telling you, Mark, that I went back through and watched all the other seasons recently.
It's amazing.
And man, this show is a ride, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. And it parallels the politics of the U.S. so beautifully all the time. What storytelling. It's so good. So good.
Yeah, I'm just so grateful that we don't have anybody as narcissistic as Homelander to worry about in modern day politics. So thank God for that, man.
No narcissistic, bleach, blonde, powerful folks trying to be president. That's fantastic.
Okay, hey, we'll see you all next time when we talk about Sweet Tooth. Hope you can go ahead and binge watch that. I think it's on Netflix. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, so tune in to Netflix, watch Sweet Tooth, and we'll see you next time on the Moonshine Jesus Show.